And we're live at 12:13. This is not a great way to boost the YouTube algorithm, but alas, sometimes I got stuff to say, and sometimes it's around midnight when I can get around to saying it. And I got a lot to say today. Got a lot to say about the Toronto Raptors. New vibes in training camp. Everything is looking very solid. Um, I did update y'all with a 15-minute quick live after the Sacramento game, but I do want to talk more in depth about a couple of topics that pertain to on court stuff, which is specifically defensive aggression, pace of play. I guess it's a little bit more than a couple of topics. Um, and turnovers, relationship between turnovers and passing, and really just the trade off of how to maximize the roster that the Toronto Raptors have under Darko Rajakovic. We're going to talk a little bit about Darko Rajakovic. The media has been fishing for a quote, and they have gotten a lot of juicy ones. And one word that just keeps coming up with Darko is energy, energy, energy. Of course, the guy has energy. This is a guy who is famous for what does he call it? Coffee naps. Um, I thought I was the only person who did this. This is actually really cool. So basically, the way coffee naps work is you take you take a sip of espresso, you go to sleep, and then you wake up in the middle when the caffeine hits you. This is absolutely crazy, obviously, but Darko Rajakovic spent some time with SerbLink. I got to see a lot of the stuff that he was talking about, and again, a lot of it is in Serbian, but got a few clips for y'all from that event on October 10th. It's like a leadership conference for Serbian Canadians in Toronto, and he's just such a rock star right now, right? The Serbian community here is just ready to embrace the Raptors' new head coach. This city is ready to embrace this new team that suddenly looks selfless. Need I say, everyone's talking about new culture, new system, et cetera, but the vibes have been immaculate. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the Kai Jones situation. And I think it's going to tie very well into the nature of athletes. I want to talk about Otto Porter. I want to talk about what Steven Jackson said. I tagged that dude on Instagram with my response and I put him on blast. Luckily, he saw. Speaking of, I was wondering whether to share this or not. NBA athletes check out Pinsar Basketball on Instagram all the freaking time. I see those blue check marks and I'm just like, word, how did he? And I'm just always kind of like mildly impressed. But, after a little while, it's like, okay, cool. You're making content about basketball. These are basketball players. Sometimes they're going to check it out. I've never been shocked. I've never been like, oh my God, he saw it. I've never had that response until like 4 days ago. I didn't tell anyone about it. I told my girlfriend. That was it. I told my girlfriend about it, and I was just like, "You're not gonna believe who saw it." So I want to take a moment of your attention, a moment of your time to set the record straight on one of my favorite players of all time, Vince Carter. And I want to talk about this from a perspective that is a little bit deeper than basketball. And I hope you'll understand where I'm coming from on this. And you know what? This channel has been close to my heart in so many ways. We talk about so many things. If you're following us on Instagram, we talk about life. We talk about, relationships. We talk about personal development. We talk about so many things. And even on this channel during these lives, sometimes we get deep. We get talking about, success patterns and neuroscience. We're talking about a whole bunch of stuff that is adjacent to basketball because all of this stuff has to do with basketball. It's not so simple to say this athlete succeeded, this athlete didn't succeed. It's not so simple to say Kai Jones is a head case, Kai Jones is this. We need to have more nuanced discussions about basketball. And I believe that when we begin to start having these slightly more nuanced discussions that are examining both sides, taking a little bit of science, taking a little bit of psychology, taking a little bit of, just life philosophy into perspective, I think we can have more balanced perspective and hopefully a more balanced relationship with these athletes that we cheer on television, because at the end of the day, they are human. And with that, I cue the intro. I promise it's going to be a good live. All right. And yes, of course, I'd be remiss if I did not say prayers to everyone in Israel and Palestine, everything that's going on over there. Thank you so much, Ken. Our hearts definitely are with the people on the ground. I've seen some footage. It is mind-blowing. So, yeah. Okay. Um, okay, let's cue that intro. Right. All right. I was going to start this live up by sharing some of the stills from the film that we just shot this weekend, but I'll save that for another live. It turned out amazing. I'm very proud of myself. I learned so much about cinematography over the last couple of years. So I was really happy to put it together in a really ambitious, super cool short about zombies. Very cool. All right. Um, Love the neoclassical music of the intro. Every time we play the intro, we get a couple of comments about it. Honestly, I love it too. I hope we will keep some variation of it throughout the rest of the year. The clips will definitely be changing. Every day I tell myself I'm going to do it, but I haven't. So it'll get a bit of a facelift, but I think the tone will stay. I think it fits. I think it fits with what we're trying to do here. Okay, so first, a little bit of a clip of Darko Rajakovic on October 10th before we get to start talking about everything. Just take a look. The charisma.
Dobro večer svima. Neću ni pokušavati sa mikrofonom, nikada nisam bio dobar sa mikrofonom.
Just introducing himself, saying good evening, and that he's going to talk without a microphone.
Da bi dopunili budžet naše porodice. What are the obstacles on that way? And there were, for sure, many moments when I questioned myself: is it worth it? Should I stick with it?
Yeah, so I mean, a few clips from that event. It was shout outs to Sir Blink, and it was about 200 people there, sold out event, super cool to just be connecting entrepreneurs. And he's talking to the next wave of immigrants from Serbia who are in Toronto, who are trying to understand what his path was. And his path was incredible. The stories that this guy can share are so freaking relatable to an NBA athlete, right? From, just the struggle, how hard it was for him. There was no, oh, he was just in the right place at the right time. I mean, this guy made his own luck every step of the way. He's been coaching since he was a teenager. I think there's so much to respect and so much to admire. And one word that just keeps coming up with him, every player has been asked, so what's this, new coach about? I mean, it's getting old at this point. We've been doing it for about 3.5 months. If you can't figure it out yet, he is a very energetic, very positive, very life affirming, very honest, very blunt, very supportive, and frankly, very knowledgeable young basketball coach. And I'm very excited about him. I'm extremely excited about him, even though he was not my necessarily first choice. Obviously, I had major push for Jama, who ended up with the Raptors anyway, so win-win. Had a major push for Jordi Fernandez, man, but the more I got to hear about Darko Rajakovic, just like the same thing with Grady Dick, the more I got to hear about him, the more I liked him. And the more I understand why Masai Ujiri and Bobby Webster chose him to lead this new charge. And, something that Jama Malalela said that really got to me was, it almost got me in the feels, was like some of the stuff that we're doing here, we haven't done in 10 years. What is that stuff? It's teaching. It's really teaching. I mean, you have a young team full of athletes, long, yes, raw, yes. But when you listen to Stanley Johnson talk about why he came to the Raptors, now when you listen to Jalen McDaniels talking about why he came to the Raptors, why do these players come to the Raptors when they comparatively have better offers on the table where they'll get more minutes for maybe a worse team or whatever. Why do they keep coming to the Raptors? Because for some reason or another, despite the last 2 years, the Raptors still have a development reputation. They have a reputation for investing in players. This is a very good reputation to have. Personally, I love it. I love it because I think there are a lot of players who've kind of come through, from Delano Banton, who seems to be really, turning a bit of a corner in Boston. Small sample size notwithstanding, there's a lot of players like that where you saw the raw potential, and you're just like, 5 years ago, these players used to just blossom. What happened? What happened, in my opinion, is the vibes changed, the culture changed, development changed, leadership changed, and now you have so much of that leadership coming back. Another question that the Toronto Raptors media has just been hammering everyone about, from Jakob Poeltl to Scottie Barnes to Dennis Schroeder, whatever, is what do these old people bring? Now, this is the most hilarious thing because Grady Dick said Otto could be his father. Yes, Grady, mathematician Grady, if he had fathered you at 11 years old, he could have been your father. Otto just turned 30. But nevertheless, having some old heads in the room, it is very helpful. This is exactly what the Charlotte Hornets don't have. This is exactly what the Houston Rockets are trying to add. The Raptors did not have to pay Fred VanVleet a max contract to add some veteran leadership. Kudos. The Rockets probably could have gotten some veteran leadership on the minimum. They could have probably brought some old dudes out of retirement. They could have done what the G League Ignite did with Jarrett Jack and Amir Johnson, who are really solid veterans. Instead, whatever. We're not going to talk about the Houston Rockets, but, maybe towards the end of it, we can talk a little bit about the Houston Rockets because they are honestly really funny to watch right now. To stay a little bit on topic here. Darko Rajakovic, new system, right? 3 questions that just keep coming up. Number 1, how aggressive are you willing to be? Deflections, steals, gambling, this whole discussion. Let's talk about that first. The Raptors have a very interesting roster. I have mentioned many times that it is rather unique. And yes, the news about Christian Koloko has not looked good, and I wish it was better and I wish it was clearer, but the Raptors are always weirdly vague about these things until they're resolved. If he was going to miss the entire season, they probably would have announced it by now. So when they're not announcing things, it's usually because it's really, really bad, or they just genuinely don't know because they're still doing testing. So if whatever he's going through has been bad enough to keep him out this long, I suspect it is serious enough. When Darko Rajakovic was asked today whether it's career threatening, he was very vague in his answer. He did not say it's not career threatening. And I wonder if, someone in the Raptors organization will be pressed for more information on this. But for now, I would just say, since Christian Koloko is one of my favorite players on the team, I am just praying. I'm praying for him, and I am praying for his family. This is a player, in my opinion, who could make many, many, many millions of dollars. This is life-changing money, and he will not make many, many millions of dollars if his career ends tomorrow. So I am just hoping for him, for his family. Really good person from everything I've heard, really just a solid human being. He seems to be in really great spirits. He's not ducking his head. He's not frowning. So I hope it's nothing too serious. But then again, even if it was serious, he'd probably still be smiling because that's just the person he is. So that being said, even without Christian Koloko, the Raptors have some very unique defenders. They have some very unique positional versatility. They have some of the most interesting wing defenders in the NBA, from Jalen McDaniels, OG Anunoby, Scottie Barnes. This is a toolkit for any head coach in the NBA. And, if you're a little bit creative, you definitely are licking your chops. Now, the Raptors are going to move away from some of the gambling that they were doing last year, which left so many gaps, so much pressure on the rim, so many leak out opportunities. They just weren't that good at it. They gave up so much, to get so little sometimes. And yeah, sometimes it worked phenomenally and Nick Nurse looked like a genius, but a lot of times it didn't. And sometimes it didn't work very late. And when they should have adjusted and gone more conservative, they didn't. From the sounds of it so far, the Raptors are going to trust their length. And I think this is the soundest strategy, because shooting and scoring over in position length that is structured and is active is very difficult. You don't need to get steals. You don't need to get steals. I say this, and I'll point to something that Darko Rajakovic said. He said, deflections are not steals, and deflections are not steal attempts. So what is a deflection? Damn it, I'm going to have to talk about the Houston Rockets. Okay, let me talk about the Houston Rockets. So I watched the Houston Rockets inter-squad scrimmage, and then I watched the Houston Rockets play their first game. One thing that I noticed about Fred VanVleet a lot last year was a lot of his passes would either get tipped, or the passes that would get tipped, he wouldn't be able to throw because he was too short. Most people who go up against the Raptors are going to be too small to go up against the Raptors. So if there is a considerable amount of pressure on the ball, but it is conservative, passing lanes are going to be tougher. If passing lanes are going to be tougher, then catches are going to be a little bit more sloppy. Something that I noticed in this inter-squad scrimmage for the Houston Rockets, almost every single Fred VanVleet pass was off target. What does that do? Well, it absolutely disrupts the flow of the offense, for one. If you have to gather a pass like for an extra 2 seconds because the guy throws it off target, that's 2 extra seconds for the defense to recover. I mean, this is the entire concept of 0.5 basketball. Don't give the other team time to recover. So I think that when you pressure the ball this way and you create disruptions and deflections, tipping the ball out of bounds, shortening the shot clock, etc., I think you can massively make the other team uncomfortable. It's not comfortable to play against this much length. It's never comfortable. However, if the other team figures out that you're going for steals, you do become a lot more predictable. So I think the Raptors are going to lean into trusting themselves a little bit more defensively this year. And I think with a solid center in the back line like Jakob Poeltl, and even his backups, whether it be Christian Koloko, Otto Porter, whoever comes in for him, they're solid. Raptors are solid across the board defensively. There are no defensive liabilities on this team. There's no one that you can genuinely attack the way that you would attack, I don't know, a Damian Lillard or a Trae Young. There's no one like that on this roster who's actually going to get minutes. And even more so if Otto is healthy and if Jeff Doughton is playing. I mean, you got solid defenders across the board. So that being said, the Raptors are going to be a little bit more conservative. Does that mean they're going to start getting fewer steals? Actually, to the contrary, I think they might get just as many steals, if not close to the same amount. I just think they're going to get them in a different way. Speaking of, the flip side of steals, turnovers. Turnovers on offense. Obviously, the Raptors were not very turnover prone last year, but Darko Rajakovic brought up a really good point about the San Antonio Spurs and the Golden State Warriors being very middle of the pack when they were championship/dynasties. Well, not really dynasties, but they had a bit of a rule over 5, 7, 10, 15 years over the NBA. In the case of the Spurs, it was a pretty extended run with Tim Duncan. And those Popovich teams were consistently middle of the pack, either 10th to 20th in turnovers. So, are turnovers a bad thing? I've never considered turnovers a really bad thing. I think it depends on the type of turnover you're getting. If you get a turnover from over dribbling the basketball, if you're getting 24-second shot clock turnovers, if you're getting offensive fouls, these are all terrible turnovers, and you should probably try to limit them, if not never get them. However, passes going out of bounds, miscommunication, these things, they have to be accounted for as a consequence of passing. And you know what else passing does? It makes you more efficient on offense. So there's always going to be a trade-off. Jakob Poeltl talked about it. I think it was a very intelligent answer, and he made a really good point about it. Basically, if we're going to be passing the ball a little bit more, there's going to be a lot of back cuts. There's going to be a lot of, movement. There's going to be, screeners coming off of, pin downs and, trying to move the ball 7, 8. I mean, the Raptors are just so much faster right now getting into their secondary action. Like it's like 4 or 5 seconds faster than it was last year. And that's early. It could revert a little bit if Pascal Siakam starts, dominating possessions, or Gary Trent gets into old habits. But for now, it feels like the Raptors are very much willing to teach this way of basketball and stick to it. That there has been so much made of this new way of playing. It has been so branded, so marketed, that anyone who tries to play the old way, I mean, I think, this is a bit of a stroke of genius from Masai Ujiri calling his team selfish, because now I think subconsciously you've kind of got the players thinking like, am I being selfish right now? Am I going to be accused of this? It's very difficult when the environment changes to stick to bad habits. I tell you, even if Fred VanVleet was still here, I think he might have a very difficult time sticking to his old habits, he might have to revert to, playing a little bit closer to how he was playing in 2017, 2018. So I think that the Raptors, will live with a few more turnovers and trust that over the course of the year that the turnovers will sort of drop. Maybe they start out 22nd or 23rd from the bottom in terms of turnovers. And then by the year end, they're like 17th or 16th. But if the offense is improved by, 3-4%, this is going to be very easy. Also, the turnover element here. Most teams are not equipped to deal with turnovers. Why? Because of floor balance. When you turn the ball over, especially if it's a live ball turnover, the worst type of turnover for any coach out there, when you commit a live ball turnover, usually you're going to give up 2 points going the other way because the floor balance is such that, typically you have a wing taking off, and usually the person at the top is either a really slow footed center who's, trailing big, or a small guard who can't take on a 2-for-1. The Raptors are huge. There aren't a lot of cross-matching difficulties with the Raptors. So if there is a team that can really shore up their transition defense, then maybe, just maybe, you might be a little bit more turnover prone, but maybe you're the best team in the league at defending the fast break. Could that be a secret, mission of the Toronto Raptors? I wouldn't doubt it. There's a lot of weak side shot blocking. I think OG, Jalen McDaniels, Pascal Siakam, who was super freaking active on defense. I did not get a chance to get into how much I was impressed, like how I didn't get to go deep into how impressed I was with his commitment to moving off the ball. Like I think a lot of people were, sort of chirping him on Twitter and saying like, Pascal Siakam, he looks disinterested, he's disgruntled, blah, 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 blah. Yo, man, like he's buying in. Like you should be very happy to see that the guy who has absolutely no issues scoring and probably will, come out and average 24, 25 points per game is willing to just let the ball move and let himself be a part of the team, as opposed to trying to be the team in preseason where it doesn't really matter. It's not going to affect his next contract. This is not affecting all NBA. Why not let the new guys get integrated? You're a veteran. It sets a really good example. I think it sets a really good tone for the team. So I was really happy for Pascal Siakam. And honestly, this is a guy whose defense really lagged last season. I think, not enough was made of it. As such things go with the Toronto media, sometimes, they kind of focus on what they want to focus on. They wanted to focus on Fred. They wanted to focus on Scottie's struggles. They wanted to focus on Otto's health. And that's what they focused on. They did not spend a lot of time focusing on the paint defense and, sometimes the help side defense of Pascal Siakam, especially when it came to paint rotations. And I think it was pretty abysmal. That being said, he hasn't forgotten how to play defense, and he hasn't forgotten how to be 7'3", wingspan, 6'10", and a gazelle. He's still got all the tools to be a phenomenal defender. And if you can lessen his load a little bit on offense, and you can lessen his minutes, and you can basically say, Pascal Siakam, we need you to be the best defender in the NBA. I think that would be a great challenge to take up for him. I don't necessarily think he can be the best defender in the NBA, but if there was a player on the Raptors other than OG Anunoby who could be the best defender in the NBA, it's probably Pascal Siakam. That's high praise. That's high praise. And his haters, his lovers and haters of the channel are probably going to say, that's, disingenuous or something. No, man. Like I really do think, like, at the cusp of, the championship run with the Raptors, and Kawhi, one of the biggest appeals to Pascal Siakam was he was blossoming into a two-way star. You're not sign up for one-way, impact. So again, 32 minutes of incredible defense and 22 points makes you, a very, very marketable and probably a max player. Definitely a max player. What am I freaking talking about? Probably max. This is definitely a max player. I mean, if he could play solid defense, he'd already be, 2 steps ahead of Jaylen Brown, because Jaylen Brown doesn't play much defense at all lately. So that being said, I think that the Raptors showed a willingness to accept a new idea. And I really liked it. I liked what I saw across the board against Sacramento. I'm looking forward to seeing a lot more of that. I think the returns are, the returns are great for a new system, new coaching staff, a lot of new faces. This is just very encouraging stuff to see overall. I think, Jakob alluded to, everyone kind of being on edge, like in a good way. Like, everyone's like, nobody's really comfortable. Like, oh, that guy knows me for the last 8 years. There's a lot of, anxiety, like, when you went to new school, right? There was always like the little goosebumps and, maybe butterflies in your stomach the day before. You want to make a good impression. And sometimes that can be a really good thing. That can be a really good thing. You can alert guys. And I think the Raptors are really taking some time to sort of relearn the fundamentals. And there are a lot of players on this team that just really, last year showed to not really completely understand fundamental basketball. So, there's a lot of plays that were made in Sacramento that frankly just weren't made all last year. Right. There were passes. I remember watching the inter-squad scrimmage, in Vancouver for the Raptors, when Scottie went off in the second quarter, which we didn't do a live for. We didn't talk about it, but like, man, there were passes made in that scrimmage alone that I was begging for 100 times last year that just weren't made. They just missed every single time. So I think that this idea of, everyone's just going to eat. Everyone's, if it's Jalen McDaniel's night, we're going to let you get 30, right? If you get hot, Grady, we're going to get you 25. You get hot, Gary, we don't care if you lead. Let the ball find the best player. And the best player often is the guy who's streaking hot from three. I don't ever want to see Gary try and hit 2 threes and then get looked off 4 or 5 possessions in a row because Fred wants to go in his bag. Well, Fred is gone. And Scottie, if you hit 2 threes, he's going to find you for the third three. Dennis Schroeder, hopefully he will also find you for the third three. And hopefully Pascal Siakam, OG Anunoby, and everyone can just get it into their head, find the hot hand, find the mismatch, find the open man, play simple basketball. And if you don't, guess what? You don't have a coach who's going to yell at you. You don't have a coach who's going to scream at you. Do you know how supportive this guy has been of just every single player on this roster? You can see it, man. You can see it in practice. You can see it in like the clips from the scrimmage. You can see it in the game. He'll just go up and he'll go up to a guy, and he's wasting no time. No time. It doesn't matter who you are. You can be an all-star, superstar, whatever, rookie of the year, former rookie of the year, first team all. He doesn't give a shit. He's still teaching. He's always teaching. I love this about him. I love this about him. I love the vibes on this new team. It is freaking awesome. I say, we the North. That is the caption of this video. We the North again. It feels good, man. It feels really good. I can't tell you how proud I was when the Raptors emerged through the We the North. Man, I was there in Jurassic Park. Then I was attending one playoff game. I loved it. I attended with my friend Diana. It was so cool, man. It was so cool to watch that team. It was so cool to cheer for DeMar and Kyle and just to be on the ground of something cool, the F Brooklyn, all of it, man. It was such energy in the city, and that energy has been dead. It's been gone. It's been gone, and it's coming back. Can you feel it? It's coming back, right? All right. Let's talk a little bit about all right, let's take a couple looks. If you add Grady, you got at least 4, if not 5, backup forwards or wings. Someone is going to play backup center, likely Precious or Boucher. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you very much. I think he's more of a guard, to be honest. I really I don't think I've ever flipped so much on a prospect. Y'all remember on draft night, I was like, Grady Dick? I don't know. It was more like Jordan Hawkins, Bilal Coulibaly. Like, these are the guys that I really, really wanted. Maybe even Kobe Buffkin. Like, I was not on the Grady train on draft night, but the minute I started looking into him more and more and more every day, it's like if on draft night I was like 4 out of 10 on him, I think within a week I was 7 out of 10 on him. By summer league, I was like 8 out of 10 on him. And right now I'm like 10 out of 10 on him. Like, I can't even tell you, like, some of the stuff that he's doing for a 19-year-old is absurd. It's absurd. It's like his presence, his ability to learn, his ability to be coached, like his humility, like overall, like, this is a former, Gatorade player, national player of the year. And, he's willing to learn from his vets. Like, he's soaking up the knowledge. It's really cool to see, man. And I have no doubt, once he fills out, gets his body right, NBA shape, whatever, he's going to struggle a little bit athletically this year. But his game is solid. He's going to be able to, get his shot off. I think he's a guard. Like, I think he's a guard, or maybe he's a small forward. I don't know. We can split hairs over that. But a Scottie Grady wing duo, or even, a Scottie Grady OG, 1, 2, 3 going forward. If those 3 guys hit what they're supposed to be, like, the Raptors are sitting pretty for the next 10 years. So I really like it. I mean, and it's a very complementary skill set thing, right? Because those two are very active defenders. I mean, none of those guys, except for OG, can be like great point of attack defenders, but certainly worth thinking about. Now, pace. Did we talk about pace? I believe we talked about pace and the trade-off between pace and efficiency, etc. And I just want to reiterate that for anyone who missed that discussion. I think the Raptors will play with more pace. I think Darko has talked about pace so much. But what does that mean? What does it mean to play with more pace? Does it mean that you're rushing? Does it mean that you have to take the first shot available? Does it mean no? It just means that your decisions have to be faster. It just means that you have to push. It means that you have to punish the defense for being slow. It means you have to make the defense make two decisions at once instead of one decision. There was a video by Samson Folk today and which got a lot of traction and a lot of buzz on Twitter and Raptors Reddit and stuff, and everyone's talking about it. And I think it's a fantastic video. And if you haven't watched it on Raptors Public, definitely go watch it. And it discusses, Samson going through all of Scottie Barnes' point guard possessions and trying to see if, he's generating enough advantages. How is he as a passer off the move, etc.? How is he as a shot creator? Who are his most efficient pick and roll partners? And there was one particular thing where Samson, I assume during Summer League, talked to, because Samson and Oren, I guess Oren, Will, these guys, they all went down for Summer League. And I guess at some point he talked to a rival scout about Scottie Barnes and how to guard Scottie Barnes. And I thought it was very illuminating. And yet also some gems, some good points there that ultimately, you're going to go under on him. And it doesn't matter whether you go over or under, you're going to live with it. He's going to be weak on his left hand. And at some point, he's going to slowly, methodically go into the paint. And he's going to back down and he's going to go do that low post thing. And at which point, you can manage it because it's slow. It's slow. It's not quick. It doesn't hit you fast enough. And I think that that's a fair point. So how does Point Scottie actually work for the Raptors? I think this will be a very interesting thing to see because I think Scottie Barnes, regardless of whether Dennis Schroeder starts or not, is going to get a lot of time to hone his skills at the point guard position. And I think that he may have some unique advantages at that position that we haven't really seen right now. And one of the things that Samson talked about was that he was very good when rejecting the screen. Also talked about how the most picks last year set for Scottie Barnes were by Christian Koloko, which doesn't surprise me one freaking bit. I think you just need to find an offense that works for him. I think the more motion, the more movement, the more decisions, the more cutters you have, the easier his life is going to be, right? We talked about, I think on a few lives ago, we talked about grandmasters playing 7 games of chess. Really, if you think about it, if you have, 3 players, locating themselves into an opportunistic place on the court at the same time, and you have like split action, or you have some sort of advantage being generated that is opening up another advantage somewhere else. Really, it is a little bit more confusing for the defense than simply pounding the basketball in the post, right? I mean, Luka ball is very predictable. Pascal and Freddie ball last year was very predictable. Making your offense less predictable only does a world of advantage. It's a world of advantage for your more dynamic, gifted passers. And I think that one thing that, whether Samson, and I think I've mentioned it before, that I just took issue with the fact that Samson wanted to trade him, for Kevin Durant, which I did not agree with. And I really didn't like that. That, he was kind of sour on the pick when the Raptors picked him over Jalen Suggs. Didn't really like that. And I guess, one thing that he's always been consistent on, whether he thinks Scottie's a point guard or a center or a small forward, whether he thinks Scottie's going to be great, whether he thinks Scottie's going to be a superstar, he's written some very glowing pieces as well about Scottie. And he's always been rational. He's always backed up his point. But one of the things I think he's never wavered on is that Scottie Barnes is a really freaking good passer. And I think that's at least 1/5 or 1/4 of what makes a really good point guard. So it's gonna be different. You can't judge Scottie Barnes against the rubric of John Morant. It's never going to look right to you. But one of the most effective point guards in the league for a really long time was Andre Miller. And I promise you, Scottie's a lot bigger, a lot stronger, and a lot more cerebral scorer than Andre Miller ever was. I mean, different era, different time, fine, but I'm saying smart players do find a way to make it work. I think he just needs reps. I think he's going to get a lot of them this year. And I'm really looking forward to it, because I think that, again, as I said, we weren't talking about Domantas Sabonis as an all NBA guy before he got to Sacramento, were we? No, we were not. We're talking about him as a fringe all-star. And I think that, sometimes that type of offense, the type of offense that Mike Brown implemented in Sacramento, really unlocks your more gifted passers, Domantas Sabonis. And, it's what Mike Malone is doing in Denver. And hopefully it's what Darko Rajakovic is preaching here. And, one thing that Brian Macon, Scottie's trainer, said last year was they were really hoping that the Raptors could use Scottie a little bit more like Nikola Jokic. It's not, please understand, Brian has been on the record several times saying that he thinks that Scottie is a point guard. The point is not point guard or center. If you really understand basketball, you realize half the time Nikola Jokic is the point guard. You also realize probably that Joel Embiid is playing point guard quite often for the Philadelphia 76ers. These positions, the way we talk about them is very, dinosaurs don't have feathers talk. It's dated. We need to evolve past this, right? So Scottie can initiate from multiple places on the court. And I do think whether you think of him as a point guard or you think of him as a center, I think he's just a very unique player who's going to generate very unique advantages and going to pose some very unique problems for defenses. All right, let's get on to, because I do want to keep this under an hour somehow, and I've got a lot more to say about things that are not necessarily on the Raptors, this version of the Raptors, but they do have to do with the Raptors. Both have to do with Raptors, but not specifically the Raptors offense or Raptors vibes or anything like that. Kai Jones has been waived. I don't want to talk about this from that sort of shitty perspective where, we talk about how this young man has thrown away his life or that he's a head case or that he's on drugs or anything like that, because none of us know him. And it's very unfair to assume that people we don't know, because they're acting strangely on social media, that there must be something pertaining to addiction, because I think the probably more coherent take would be that he's probably suffering through something very serious in regards to mental health. And, it's irresponsible sometimes the way that we talk about athletes. And what I find most disheartening sometimes, I don't find it particularly surprising that Doug Smith or Josh Lewinberg or Michael Grange are very irresponsible when it comes to talking about athletes. They are not athletes. I don't think anyone takes them all too seriously when they say Scottie Barnes doesn't have or has work ethic issues. I mean, some people swear it's gospel or whatever, but I don't think that, and so like when someone like CJ Miles, who is a former athlete, comes to his defense and, says like, apologize or whatever. And, or when Kyle Kuzma comes to his defense, you kind of understand that athletes empathizing with athletes is a big thing. What I find particularly disheartening, in my opinion, is when athletes who've been through the grind, who understand, they sell out their own brothers. That annoys me more than, these media beat types doing what they do. And so, obviously, I hope that there will be support for Kai Jones. I hope that his NBA career can continue. I hope that he finds a stable organization, because the Charlotte Hornets are a dumpster fire. And if you've been following the Charlotte Hornets over the last 4 or 5 years, you understand that there's a lot of things that have happened with that team that don't have anything to do with one particular player. There's just a lot of players, whether we're talking about Montrezl Harrell, whether we're talking about Miles Bridges and everything that's happened with him, whether you're talking about LaMelo Ball, whether you're talking about LiAngelo Ball, whoever you talk about on that team. I mean, there are so many cases. And of course, Kai Jones. There's so many cases of things going wrong with players not developing, players not living up to their potential, players, flailing out, players having attitude issues, players this, players that. And Brandon Miller is just the perfect, person to throw into that mix, So I just think that he needs a more stable organization. Hopefully he catches on with a stable organization like the Toronto Raptors, and, go play for the 905, have, some sort of stability out there. But prior to, I was reading a Reddit thread about this, and someone said that he's displaying a lot of traits of bipolar disorder. And as someone who's been around quite a few people who have bipolar disorder, the traits are very eerily familiar to me. Not a diagnosis, not diagnosing the guy, don't know him. But I think that some caution should be used when discussing athletes struggling with stuff like this, including people like Ben Simmons, James Harden, whoever you want to talk about. Now, speaking of athletes selling people down the well, I blasted Steven Jackson for this, and he saw it, and I'm glad he saw it, because this is what he had to say about one of my favorite players in the NBA, Otto Porter Jr.
Got good money that ain't done shit. When you got so many players that then got good money that ain't done shit. I'm talking about that then got 100 million. Otto Porter, where he at? He got 100 in Washington. We ain't seen him since. So I'm saying, like, it's hard to judge people, bro, on the fact that he got all the money. Yes, the biggest contract, but it's a lot of motherfuckers who making 100 million today in the league and ain't doing shit.
Where do I start with this dude? First of all, I'm really happy Kwame Brown blasted your ass. Real happy. Because he got sick and tired of you too. It's real, like, I'm not trying to be like rude about it, but it's real weird energy when dudes who are like grown dudes with millions of dollars sit there on. Sorry, this topic makes me really mad. Like, it makes me want to swear, so I'm not going to swear, but like, it really pisses me off when people talk about this. First of all, here's some fact check for you, and I'm so glad he saw this, yo. Like, that's the thing. I tagged him. We have a couple mutual friends, so I was like, he's probably going to see this, so I tagged him on purpose. And the reason I tagged him is because I needed him to get real correct about who he's talking about. Otto Porter Jr. ain't done shit. We haven't seen him since he got the bag. Yo, I think he got the bag in 2015. He won a championship as an occasional starter in 2021. Where the fuck were you? Don't you cover the NBA? This is crazy to me. Counting another man's dollars is so fucking stupid. I don't even get it. Like, it's never occurred to me how much money athletes make. I don't care. They worked really freaking hard for it. I don't care how much money Ben Simmons made. Someone paid it to him. Congratulations. There's a lot of people out there who make $200,000, $300,000 a year, sometimes $20 million a year to be CEOs of a company. They don't do shit all year either. Yo, stop counting other people's money. It's not going to make you any richer. And I promise you, it is the weirdest mentality to take. And yet, of course, this is a complete symptom of how this whole thing is set up, right? Do you know how much Richard Petty made when he was, running things from LSC? Did you know how much he was, making? Did you know how much Tim Lawicki made? No. But you know how much Pascal Siakam makes, right? Of course, because it's public. Right? It's a little weird, right? A lot of pressure. Right? I mean, shit, it's kind of weird. A lot of salaries are not public, unless, of course, your company is public, in which case, it's, if you're a high-ranking officer, your salary is public. But this is on, like, it's not Googleable. Like, everyone doesn't know. You know what I mean? Like, Damian Lillard gets $260 million. Oh, this guy's washed. He doesn't play no defense. Blah, blah, blah. Bro, like, shit. I promise you, there's not a superstar who's an actual superstar who's actually fairly played in the NBA. I promise you that. They're all underpaid relative to what they're actually generating. I mean, look, just a free crash course in economics. The more number of people's problems you solve, the more money you get. This is as simple as it gets. If you create the cure for cancer tomorrow, I promise you'd be a billionaire overnight. Okay? Because you're solving a lot of problems. NBA players solve a lot of people's problems, man. They solve people's frigging dysfunctional family issues. They bond fathers and sons. They're creating so many freaking other jobs and avenues. Like, there is a reason they're paid what they're paid. Trust me. There is a reason they're paid what they're paid. And yes, sometimes, your team is going to sign a dude and he's just going to sulk and he's going to stay at home and he's going to demand a trade. And it probably pisses you off because you pay $400 to watch a guy who makes $40 million and he's not playing and you're pissed. I get it. I completely get it. But the way we go about talking about it sometimes can get a little bit weird. And for Steven Jackson to say this shit about Otto Porter Jr., first of all, Otto Porter Jr. is one of the most solid people in the NBA, period. I have been watching this guy since high school. I watched him in college. I watched him in Washington. He was one of my favorite players, bar none. Just so underrated. I think it's criminal that he didn't make an all-star team. Prototypical 3-and-D guy. He has rehabbed through so many freaking injuries. And to listen to Will Lou talk about him has bothered me all last year. It makes me angry because you're acting like injuries are his fault, or like he's not trying, or he doesn't want to be out there and support these dudes. Now, Otto doesn't give a shit. He doesn't give a shit. He doesn't have social media. He plugs himself out of this shit. He has a great family, great support system around him. He's a solid human being. The shit just bounces off of him. But it bothers me because ultimately, at the end of the day, legacies are painted by people with very small paintbrushes. Oh, that was damn poetic. I hope you know what I meant. All right. I'll tell you where this comes from. I talked about it before a little bit, but I really want to get into this right now because it really struck a nerve with me today. And I want to show y'all something. And I don't know if you've seen it. If you haven't seen it, this is going to be a nice little crash course in Raptors history. If you're a newer Raptor fan who kind of, came around 2016, 2018, 2019, around the championship run, this is going to be a little bit of a history lesson for you because there is a moment, I believe, that the Raptor fandom turned on one of their own, their prodigal son. And this is a little reflection on that moment. Take a look, and then I'll give you a little bit on my perspective on it. And yeah.
What Carter's mother insisted he work on was his degree, which he did in the summers following his first and second seasons in the league.
I had kids like, we didn't think we were going to come to the study group. So I was like, no, this is like, I'm taking this serious. I'm here to do it. I worked my butt off, and it was important to me to graduate. And I finished with flying colors. And I remember ripping up that paper, probably not that first summer, that second summer.
In the summer of 2000, Carter completed his coursework in Afro-American Studies. Graduation was scheduled for the following spring, in the middle of the NBA playoffs.
And my mom said, what are you going to do if you get to May 20? I said, I'll figure it out.
He would have to. In early May 2001, for the first time in franchise history, Toronto would advance to the second round of the NBA playoffs.
Carter, yes! These are defining moments in the 3-year career of Vince Carter.
The opponent, Allen Iverson's 76ers.
We didn't think we was going to come in here and stop Vince Carter.
What a performance tonight by Allen Iverson. This is one for the books. Look up. And here it's going to be Carter. Boy, did he have an answer tonight.
Carter and Iverson both averaged more than 30 points in the first 6 games. With the series tied, Game 7 would take place on Sunday, May 20th.
He made his mother a promise of graduation from college. He made good on that promise. Sunday is graduation day.
Prior to, I went to every player, every person in the organization. And, I told them I'm going to be at practice. After practice, I'm going to fly to Chapel Hill. I'm going to graduate at 9 a.m. I will be back for our walkthrough at 11. Do you have a problem with it? Every person in the organization said, as long as you're back, I don't care. I'm happy for you.
8 hours, 400 miles separate the two events. It's a decision some will admire as special and others will admonish as selfish.
I'm not going to comment on that. Sometimes a man has to do what a man has to do.
Are these people out of their minds? Do they understand what they are telling the young people when they question Vince Carter, the role model?
You have a lot of concern, but he made a decision and he wants to be there. He feels it's that important to him.
He is a millionaire, but values his education to the point where he went back to school and sat in the classroom and churned out those papers.
She couldn't enjoy seeing her son graduate from college like any other mother would, in my opinion. I think it was still one of the proudest moments of her life.
Vince Carter breaks the Raptors huddle now, and the graduate is ready to go.
And I remember in the first quarter, I'm running down the court and I got tired. My legs got heavy. It's like, it's jet lag really setting in.
It's Vince Carter, the running jump shot. Die bounce, no rebound.
I missed the first couple of shots. I'm like, oh man, maybe they were right.
Carter struggled. He made only 6 of his first 17 shots. Then, with 2 seconds left, the Raptors are down by 1 and have the ball.
I remember in the timeout, I said, Coach, give me the ball. What a day it would be to graduate 9 a.m. and at 9 p.m., you hit the game-winning shot against Allen Iverson in the 76ers. Couldn't write a better story.
Curry will play in. Curry looking for Carter. Carter runs to the near side. He stops. He shoots. His shot is up. It's off the rim.
But I missed.
And the Sixers advance to the Eastern Conference Finals as Vince Carter misses a shot and the Sixers win the game.
All I think about is that shot. You know, something you live for. You know, maybe next year.
Vince Carter double clutched along the left side, missed the shot.
I made my decision and I was going to stick to it.
I will tell you what this moment, there are watershed moments. I think they call them watershed moments, or moments that change your life. Vince Carter attending his graduation changed my life. I'll tell you how, and I'll tell you why. I was 14 years old when Vince did this. He was my favorite player in the whole world. I had a Vince Carter jersey. I had a Vince Carter poster in my room. Like a lot of kids out there, I did. And like a lot of, kids in Canada, I was new to Canada at the time, really looked up to this dude. I would copy his moves. I would want to dunk. I couldn't dunk, but I wanted to dunk like him. Vince was the biggest athlete in the world, and he was in Toronto. He was the biggest athlete in the world. I'm not kidding. He was the leading all-star vote getter. He was LeBron before LeBron. He was Jordan after Jordan for a very brief moment in time. There was a year where he led the entire NBA in value for replacement. I don't think Toronto knew what they had, and before they knew it, he was gone. I admired a lot of athletes. I did. I admired athletes from back home. I loved the work that they did in the community. I admired, Allen Iverson for his toughness. I admired Kobe for his singular vision. I admired Tim Duncan for his humility and his team first, stuff. I had all their jerseys. I had all their shoes, Well, I had Allen Iverson's shoes and Vince's shoes. But Vince was special to me. Watching the city turn on him was one of the most heartbreaking things I think I've ever gone through as a fan. It was hard. I think I've talked about it before on the live that I attended, the game where he came back with the Nets. Couldn't hear myself think. People hated him so much. I heard the N-word probably 150 times that night. There was a comment here about the derogatory nature of how that degree was covered. Yes, it was covered a little bit differently because it was Afro-American studies. And because he was a multimillionaire athlete who was known for running and jumping, people could understand the sense of why he needed to graduate. They just saw it as a prima donna selfishness thing. I got to tell you, a lot of the reasons I admired Vince are a lot of the reasons I admire Scottie Barnes. One of the things I loved about Scottie Barnes, maybe a lot of people don't know about, wasn't really publicized, was that Scottie actually continued to go to school at Florida State after the season wrapped. Most players don't because they don't care. He cared. He cared to finish what he started. And I don't know if Scottie's going to graduate from Florida State. I don't have intel on that or anything, but I know that I admire people who have a balanced perspective on life. Vince Carter was a role model for millions and millions of kids. He was the favorite player. I mean, I can't tell you the last time I've seen like a Raptor jersey in like so many rap videos. It was all number 15, Vince Carter. So many people looked up to this guy, including me. And I gotta tell you, around 14 years old, my life was going completely off the rails when it came to academics. Totally off the rails. I was skipping classes. I was doing all sorts of stuff. And my grades were in the toilet. And Vince's unabashed unapologetic stance on education, the value of education, how he defended himself ruthlessly for this decision, forced me to really think about my life a lot. I tell you, my mother passed away on December 15th. On December 17th, just 2 days later, I had an exam to write at U of T. I could have excused myself from that, no problem. My TA was totally understanding. My prof was like, take weeks off if you need, take it, make it up later, go deal with your stuff. Yo, man, I went and I wrote that exam. This is still one of the most proudest moments of my life, and I would not have done it if it were not for Vince Carter. You have a human being who has worked so freaking hard to become a basketball player, to take care of his family for the rest of generations and generations and generations, to take care of his mother. And instead of celebrating that, this young man who's 20 something years old, 24 years old at the time, 25 years old, would consume, would do this very unpopular thing and take all this heat and all this criticism to make up a promise to his mother for the sake of education. And he had done everything in that series to put the Raptors in a position, and frankly, in a series that they had no business being in. The Sixers were, frankly, finals bound. Allen Iverson, Dikembe Mutombo was a very good team, full of defenders. And the fact that he still kind of questions at all, if he questions at all, whether he made the right decision or the wrong decision to go to his graduation because he had, heavy legs or whatever that night. I hope one day he knows that, at least for one Raptor fan, I think he made the greatest decision ever. And I'm really proud of him. And I was really proud of him. And I was really proud to be a Vince Carter fan at that moment. And I'm still very proud to be a Vince Carter fan. And I will always be a Vince Carter fan. And I got to tell you, when he came back with Memphis and the Raptor fans finally cheered him and they played that video tribute and he cried, it was a really cathartic moment for me. It was great to see a city really come to terms with what he meant to them, because there's no way. I never saw anyone burning Fred VanVleet's jersey. I'll tell you that. There's no one burning number 23 jerseys right now, because the truth is, you got to love someone to hate someone. Sometimes you got to love someone a lot for them to really break your heart that way. And when he left, I think it broke a lot of people's hearts. I don't think a lot of people, misguided by this media space, people like Doug Smith, Dave Feshik, and people who wrote about him back then, people who have a lot of blood on their hands, and they should apologize via op-ed. They should really pen a letter, an open letter to Vince Carter, and probably all co-sign it and say sorry for all the lies that we invented about you and all the false narratives and all the pain that we caused you and your family and all the negative things that were said about him and all the stories that were invented about him. Fuck all of it. I'm very proud of him. I was very proud of him back then, and I'm very happy he did it. And I hope that there are other kids like me who grew up thinking more seriously about their education because he made that tough decision. To the larger point of just generally how we talk about, athletes, money, all this stuff, I think it's very, very important to remember that these are human beings, that ultimately we may not like how they play, but we should probably keep it to, I don't like how this person plays, or I don't like how this person leads, or whatever. But when you start talking about other stuff, especially when it comes to someone who's trying to do the right thing and, who's being such a good teammate. And, as he mentioned in that video, he went and asked every single member. And frankly, if he makes that shot, no one's saying shit about this, are they? But he missed the shot. And so everyone gets to write the other story because it sells, But here's the story I wish they would have written. Superstar, multimillionaire athlete honors a promise to his mom. That's a great, great lesson. As a person who didn't have a dad around, as a person who had a stepdad who was a piece of shit, I tell you, I didn't have a lot of positive male role models. I looked everywhere to piece one together. Oh, yeah, I like that about my teacher. Oh, I like that about, this guy who's, 2-3 grades ahead of me on my basketball team. Or, I like this about this kid in my building or whatever. And I'm trying to piece together what it means to be a man. What does it mean to be a protector, a provider? What does it mean to be a brother? What does it mean to be a son? What does this shit mean? Because frankly, sometimes you need someone to show you what it means. I learned a lot about how to be a man and how to be someone of integrity from Vince Carter. And I tell you that every single day that he continued to play in the NBA was a fuck you to everyone who wrote that shit about him in 2001. Because I tell you, the guy who didn't love the game, didn't care about the game, was too injury prone, blah, 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 played until he was 43 years old. The guy who didn't love the game became a mentor and an inspiration to thousands of young athletes, continued to work in every community he went to, whether it was Atlanta, Memphis, wherever he played, Orlando. He was an integral part of the community, a great teammate. I remember it was like 2007, 2008, or something around there, where he was just exiting his like peak Vinsanity, prime years, after a couple of, good seasons with New Jersey at the time. I remember Devin Harris, who was a young point guard after Jason Kidd was traded, and Vince was pretty much the last man standing from that trio, talking about just how Vince had taken him under his wing and how he was just so willing to teach and so willing. And Trae Young, years and years later, talking about the same thing. This is a player that you should absolutely admire, because in an age where athletes refuse to give an inch for their ego, look at Russell Westbrook, look at Carmelo Anthony, guys who refuse to move to the bench. Allen Iverson, one of my favorite players, but he didn't have that humility. What a balanced person. You should admire that. And we should all, I hate to be all kumbaya about this, but we should all try to be a little bit more like Vince. You know what I mean? So anyway, I wanted to say that to say this. I probably have pissed off a lot of people over the last year, talking about Fred, talking about Pascal, and maybe a lot of people would be like, hey, pot calling kettle black here. You shit on Fred VanVleet, you shit on Pascal Siakam. Okay, let me try to be a little bit more responsible this year. I will do my best. I honestly will. I promise you from the bottom of my heart, I'm going to try. I'm going to try to be a lot more fair. I thought I was being fair, but I could definitely be better, and I know that. I acknowledge that. So I'm going to try to be a lot more leveled, a lot more fair in my critique. I'm not going to hold anything back, obviously, but it's not going to get too personal. I do want to always keep in mind that the players that we're watching on the television are somebody's son, somebody's brother, somebody's friend. They have shit going on in their lives. Their life does not revolve around basketball. There was actually a video by one of my favorite YouTubers a couple of days ago questioning whether Nikola Jokic even cares about basketball. Yo, man, come on, get real. Right? Nikola Jokic loves basketball. He loves basketball. But, if he comes out and struggles, people are going to be like, oh, he's fat, he's this, he's that. It just sells, man. I don't know why hate sells as well as it does, but apparently it does. So let's try to flip it and sell a little bit of love while we're at it. I can't believe I just said that and it just came out of my mouth. But you know what, James? I've been listening to your shit like a lot, and you can just cut it out. All right. Like, this is getting old. This is getting repetitive. You try to bait Leo into a lot of shit. Now you're trying to bait me. You're trying to talk shit about, this is really corny. Who the fuck are you, man? Like, what? Like, who the fuck cares? You're an opinion. Congratulations. I don't think anyone here is like vibing with you. So, you're a very unhappy person. I get that from the years and, talking to you. But there's really no reason to disrupt anything sentimental. If you don't get it, you don't get it. That's cool. That's great. It's no problem. You don't have to like fucking, come here with your, old man yells at cloud mentality and, expect all of us to fucking, like, this is probably vibing with somebody out there. I mean, I know that you have a lot of criticism about this channel, but obviously I think we're doing something right. Are we? Aren't we doing something right? I'm always going to keep it 100. I'm going to speak from the heart. That's what I do. So if I'm upset about something, I'm going to speak from the heart. And if I feel, particularly sentimental about something, I'm also going to speak from the heart. I'm never going to cheat this channel from my honest perspective on something, because I assume that part of the appeal of this channel is that I speak from the heart. So I'm always going to keep it that way. It was a joke, bud. Honestly, man, birds of a feather flock together. I don't fuck with anybody you fuck with, so that kind of makes sense, right? Anyways, and by the way, Celine Dion's not so bad. All right. So, what am I saying? Let's try to be a little bit more level-headed. There's a lot of good shit going on in Raptorland. I realized that a lot of negativity happened last year, and I don't necessarily blame this fan base for, being a lot more negative, because I think the vibes around this team were negative, and maybe the fan base becoming negative, and me becoming negative, and probably leading the charge on a lot of narratives and pushing a lot of stuff out there about Fred being selfish, etc., probably caused a little bit more. It almost exacerbates issues, right? Like, it's positivity, negativity, it's like it's an amplification, like an echo chamber, right? So it can just bounce around. So look, it seems like the Raptors have turned the page. I think we can all try to turn the page as well, right? I think personally, if you want my opinion, I would much rather spend an entire year being really happy that my team is playing well than sit here for an entire year and talk shit about the one player or two players who are not playing well, right? And to be honest, I think fans have a very important role to play in terms of energy. I think that the fans sometimes at the ACC last year, or the Scotiabank Center, Scotiabank Arena, were a little bit dead, and I don't blame them. The product on the floor was very boring to watch last year. It was very predictable. It was very uninspired. And there were moments, of joy, and where Raptors were up big, or that Scottie Barnes is going off in the fourth quarter, or Pascal Siakam's having a big game, and people can get something to cheer about. But there wasn't a lot to cheer about last year. And kudos to the Raptors, kudos to Masai Ujiri, Bobby Weister, etc., to acknowledge it, make the necessary changes, and hit reset on this culture, and bring us back to a team that we can hopefully all be proud of. There are moments in Raptor history, I think, that we can all remember, from the start of the We the North era to the arrival of Kawhi Leonard to the blossoming of Vince Carter. And hopefully we are on the precipice as fans of witnessing another, which is, I guess, witnessing the Darko Rajakovic ball movement era. Because I tell you, system does matter. Watch Rick Adelman completely flip the Sacramento Kings offense. I watched, Mike Brown do it last year again for the Sacramento Kings. Watched Greg Popovich, sustain a certain type of brand of basketball for like almost 2 decades. I've watched Steve Kerr just go and give the entire Warriors, one of the most joke franchises ever, the most successful run over 10 years. Coaching, philosophy, movement, culture, all of these things matter. Development staff matters. And I just love everything that the Raptors have done this offseason. Yeah, I'm not thrilled about everything the Raptors have done this offseason. Yes, like some of these moves are going to come back and bite you in the butt. Maybe there'll be some, maybe there'll be some pushback on some players that they let go of, or maybe didn't sign or whatever. But I mean, overall, I think the intention has been very solid and from a good perspective. So I bid you a good night and have a great one. And yeah, I don't know. I really like Vince Carter, man. I really liked Vince Carter, and I was so flabbergasted when I saw his name pop up, and I was just like, you know what? This is just one person in the world that I really hope one day just that I can share with them in person what they did for me personally, because it was very important. It was a very important lesson to learn very early on to be yourself at the end of the day, right? Yeah. Anyways, hit subscribe, hit like, do all that good stuff, and have a great night. Thank you to the 180 of you who have been here at a very strange hour in the night. And have a good one. I will see you probably for the next post-game live, which will be, I believe, on Sunday. Maybe if there's something that pops up before that, or maybe some offensive breakdown or whatever. Yeah, talk to y'all later. Thank you. Cheers, guys.